You know, all this racial conversation is, you know, at a fever pitch, it feels like.
The Dan York State of Mind program is brought to you in part by Lookout Rhode Island and Takeo Comfort Solutions.
All right, so last night was night 2 for the presidential debates, so we'll touch on that with my guests. But I also want to kind of dig into a question I raised here last night and also on the radio yesterday afternoon, which is if we could just sit back for a second and just take note that Democratic candidates for the presidency are arguing amongst their major arguments that the sitting president of the United States is a racist. And before you start throwing things at the screen and arguing that he is or he isn't, of course he is, or no he isn't, you know, blah, blah, you know, it's liberals, before you get into that, I want you to just take a breather and say it to yourself slowly. Candidates seeking the presidency of the United States suggest that the current office holder is a racist. I don't know what the moral of the story is and what you say after it saturates, but we are so desensitized to this time that we are in that we're arguing whether he is or he isn't as if it's, you know, his batting average is good enough to be in 5th or 6th place in the lineup. Does it make any sense to you? All right. I want to talk to my professor, my guest, who's a professor of African American Studies, and was really smart about this kind of stuff in a moment. In the meantime, headline from last night, Joe Biden necessarily is going to have to just, you know, beat down the competition to survive. Whether he does or not is still undetermined, but here's coverage from last night.
California Senator Kamala Harris went after former Vice President Joe Biden last night in Detroit.
You do nothing to hold the insurance companies to task.
The other candidates on stage also attacked the frontrunner.
There's a saying in my community, you're dipping into the Kool-Aid and you don't even know the flavor.
It looks like one of us has learned the lessons of the past and one of us hasn't.
Biden argued the focus needs to be on more recent history.
Everybody's talking about how terrible I am on these issues. Barack Obama knew exactly who I was.
At times, he punched back.
You came to Syracuse University with me and said it was wonderful. I don't know what's happened except that you're now running for president.
Like the first round of the debate, moderates and progressives spend much of the time going after each other on health care.
I don't understand why Democrats on this stage are fear-mongering about universal health care. They can choose a public option.
For a Democrat to be running for president with a plan that does not cover everyone, I think is without excuse.
Harris did not escape unscathed last night. Hawaii Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard knocked her criminal justice record.
She put over 1,500 people in jail for marijuana violations and then laughed about it when she was asked if she ever smoked marijuana.
Similar to the first debate, Democrats saved their harshest criticism for President Trump.
We can no longer allow a white nationalist to be in the White House.
The first thing that I'm going to do when I'm president is I'm going to Clorox the Oval Office.
More than half the candidates are at risk of not meeting the higher polling and donation threshold to take part in September's debate.
So, you know, naturally, Joe's got to fend off a lot. Kamala Harris had to fend off some, too. So clearly, in that group, she was seen as the formidable second placer. I'll tell you, this is that debate was brutal last night in the sense that I couldn't take it after 2.5 hours. I just was like, only Cory Booker could smile through the whole thing. Other than that, it was just a beatdown fest on each other. And, you know, Donald Trump doesn't drink. But if he did, he would have been drunk last night, just, you know, with joy. Headline here, I think, is interesting, and is our conversation. Why Democrats are unsure about how to confront Trump's race baiting. Professor, welcome back. Nice to have you.
Thank you. Nice to be back.
You're fresh off a little trip to Europe. back home, so to speak. I'm sure you've got some European perspective on everything that's going on here as well. But do you have an executive summary type of thought to answer the headline question about how Democrats handle this race thing? And do you have a thought about my open, which is why, just say it slowly to yourself.
Yeah,
Can you
no,
believe
I
we're
agree.
in this time?
Yeah, right.
Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, because I remember when Howard Dean got a little excited, and that was his completely career over, right? Do you remember that?
When he screamed.
Yeah, and that was it for him. So see how much we've changed when the bar's been lowered so much that it goes from being overexcited to saying some very volatile and racist things, and which would have disqualified most people, or if not everyone, 10, 20 years ago. So immediately.
Over and over and over again. Now,
And he doubled down on it.
Well, disqualification as a candidate, we've never had, a sitting president so openly behave this way.
Well, we have in history. I mean,
Who?
slave owners, people like Andrew Jackson was not shy in telling people what he thought, but media wasn't what it is now.
But we're supposed to have evolved over a couple of centuries.
Yes, yes. Yes, we should have. We don't learn from our mistakes, partly because we don't know our history well enough. The general public has not been educated enough in its own history, so it's making the same mistakes. I was in Europe, and people were saying, wow, America looks like Germany in 1939. That's scary, because we know how that went. And that
now,
seems
who says
like
that? Your academic friends, or you feel that across the board?
Academic friends and folks I grew up with in England, where I learned more U.S. history in England than I did here, doing my PhD. And was something I noted when I came here and when I'm in front of students. It's like the amount of history, and I teach at an Ivy League, the amount of history I can assume students know is a lot less than what I knew when I was at that age with my education in England. And that's, for me, it's, that kind of purposeful under-education of civics and government and history in schools perpetuates this lack of, this insular thinking of what is American and how we are repeating the same mistakes again and again. So yes, we should have evolved, but I just see a very cyclical pattern happening in the U.S.
Huh.
I'm sorry.
No. I'm digesting that because I've never thought about it as a pattern repeated because we're so unfamiliar with history that we don't. I guess it's human nature. You would suggest then that human nature is inclined not to repeat poor patterns, but if you don't know what poor patterns are, you do.
And also,
is that what you're saying?
I don't know about human nature. I think human nature is always designed to protect one. We're designed to protect oneself and the people closest to us. But there are moments in history where that has led to world wars, right? Or to ways of discriminating against other people that actually meant slowing down the country's own progress. And I think that's been a problem. The fear-mongering, sort of the education on TV, or the so-called education on TV, right? So people aren't reading books, aren't reading historians, right? There's a very much an anti-intellectual vein that's very powerful in this country. So folks won't listen to me, but they'll listen to some pundit on Fox News who hasn't got a degree in anything. Do you know what I mean? And the kind of fear-mongering and the ability to talk your way through something becomes a lot more valued and believable than someone who's actually done the history and actually done the work and seen it. And as a citizen of this country, I have opinions, but the opinions are based on what I've seen as fact. So one of the things I do in my classroom is, if you don't agree with me, that's fine, but figure out why you don't and make it based in fact and not emotion. And then the students, it's just learning critical thinking. You know, you take in information and you really process it and hear the other side and go to that quiet voice, right? And figure out what you believe in and why. And you have to be able to have a civilized discussion with someone without resulting to bad words and you know, insults.
Let's talk more about that when we come back, because it seems like we've got a commander-in-chief who leads the league in non-critical thinking, leading a lot of folks who don't bother to do it either. Stay with us.
I am the least racist person there is anywhere in the world. When con men, who I've known almost all my business life, because I had to deal with him, unfortunately, in New York. But I got along with him, Al Sharpton. Now, he's a racist. He's a racist. But when people, let me explain to you. What I've done for African Americans in 2.5 years, no president has been able to do anything like it.
I'm sorry, it's laughable. Yeah. The last time I was here, I think I talked about what the definition of racism was, right? And how, you know, racism is about power. So how can Al Sharpton be a racist? It doesn't even make sense.
Well, I'm no Sharpton fan.
You don't have to be,
he's phony.
But that's not the same as being a racist.
And I don't think the president understands the difference between the two. He's just
not.
grasping at concepts and straws. But there seems to be, and you know, I hate to keep referring to the base because it feels like a cult in a way. But the base is thinking as less about this as he is. It seems to me, and there's just this kind of this thing going on. And then there's this feeling that liberals in general, or minorities when you want to identify them, are causing the president to have to speak this way.
You can't make him do anything he doesn't want to do.
It's like Hatfield, but right now in this country, when it comes to the racial conversation, there's a Hatfield and McCoy type of thing going on here, where you can't figure out who the bad family was, unless you actually want to be really, really, really objective about it, and then you can figure out very quickly that it is the President of the United States that instigates this kind of conversation and has a perpetual behavior where he dabbles minimally or steps right into it.
Mm-hmm. And he's done this before his presidency. Let's not forget what he said about the Central Park 5 when that case was happening.
Right.
Immediate death sentencing. There's a way in which when he interacts or talks about African Americans, he goes to the worst stereotypes and to the worst insults he can, completely. African Americans, Latinos are all racists and, you know, rapists and thieves, right? I mean, those are the only terms that he can use to explain.
I'm not sure he spoke in such a superlative when he started, but clearly the tone was there. And it's amazing how people hear things or see things. You know, I could show you this, and if it was off color, you'd say, well, there's a touch of gray. You could say, a little whitish brown. You know, we look at things differently. We hear things differently. Clearly, he set the tone back then. Was it as dramatic and acute as people suggest it is? I don't know. I think there's a laziness in actually going backwards, but I'm not defending him. And he continues to add and add. Charlottesville is an example.
That was the beginning, I think.
Right. It goes on and on and on. But here's the challenge. Mm-hmm. What does the Democratic Party and what do candidates for that office do with this thing? I was just literally breath taken away over the last 2 nights with the amount of candidates who repeat the charge of racism against the sitting president of the United States. We have, what, 16 months?
Too long. Coming from the European model, that's too long.
Right? 16 months of that?
Yeah.
What happens if we have 16 months of that?
We're all going to be numbed to it, and we're not going to hear it anymore. Because we've stopped hearing, we've stopped listening to it, right? Because we've already been numbed with it so much. Everyone. It's just that word out there now, but no one's actually defining it or thinking critically about it.
You must go nuts over this as a professor of African American studies.
I can't watch
it. No, you must go nuts over the idea that unlike, say, not unlike, Facebook has corrupted the term friend, for instance, or like. The term racism, which I always used to think is like the third rail
Yes.
Like, I talk about bigotry,
Yes.
but using the word racism or racist was something that I would never take out of my repertoire unless it was like, dun 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 dun, right?
Yeah.
It is now.
People throw it around way too much.
Term.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
What are we going to do? Add a word? Do we have to add a higher bar word in order to be able to supplant the term racism?
I think we need to check each other. I think we need to check each other. It can't be just me, right? It has to be other white folks checking each other about, what do you mean by that exactly?
Why just white folks?
Because white folks listen to white folks. They're not going to listen to me necessarily. The kind of students I get in my class usually are the ones who think the same way I do, or want to understand, who are open-minded enough and want to be there in that space to learn. The kind of people who would support the president in what he says aren't the people who actually want to be dissuaded from that, right? You have to have an open mind and have that little crack of opportunity to have a real discussion.
Okay, so I'm fascinated about the, I don't know what it is, 5 to 20% of the population out there that is going to try to make a decision on this presidency next year, hopefully on some issues, to try to clear the gunk of this conversation away, even though it's not something that we should clear because it's so important. That's right. Isn't that the catch-22 sociological conversation here? I mean, we can't dismiss this. All the phlegm that's kicked up is better than hiding it. I think subtle racism is more powerful than overt racism. Do you agree?
It can be very damaging, yes.
The
absolutely.
Quiet type of discrimination, the quiet type of...
But none of it's been very quiet of late.
Right,
you know?
so is this phlegm that's been coughed up, sorry for the term, is it better? Is it more helpful? Is there a chance that it will be something we can constructively mop up and use?
Wouldn't it be nice? But I don't know if it's better. I think, having a child of color, in this scenario, raising children in this, where that is now considered normal behavior, right? Children learn from the adults.
That being what?
What do you mean?
That being what normal behavior?
The behavior that, having things shouted at you is normal, and those words are normal and it's okay, or, it's, people are like, oh, you can't say that.
Which words?
Any insulting words about race. My child and I walk down the streets in Providence and on my campus, and I've had car full of white youth open the windows because they know it's a college campus and be spewing out a whole bunch of words on campus. I've had it happen at least twice. And I've had students tell me the same thing. So that kind of behavior is now okay, where it wasn't a few years ago. And that's here in Providence.
You think that's accelerated in the last couple of years?
Oh, absolutely. I've been here 22 years. I've never had that happen to me, ever. And I'm on campus, right? But, with the public streets. So, yeah, no, I think, and so, I'm trying to tell my son that's not normal behavior. That's not okay. Don't do the same thing. Even in defense, don't do the same thing, because when it comes to discipline, they're going to come after you and not them. Because that's how, that's how I have to raise him. I have to raise him to fear the police. I shouldn't have to raise him to fear the police, right? We have enough there, enough history there, and enough cases going against families who have had husbands or sons killed by the police, have had them see the killers go free just recently, right? So I can't raise my son to think that we're living in an ideal world. The world that America thinks it is.
So where is it possible that there'll be any leadership that can get a hold of this? We'll talk about it next.
What did you think when you heard the tweet?
I'm dealing with the biggest bully I've ever had to deal with in my lifetime, and trying to push back on that and trying to do the job that we all have been sent here to do, which is centered around the people at home. This is a distraction.
Do you feel enough Republicans have spoken up against the president?
Absolutely not.
What message does that send?
The normalization of it. The fact that it's against our core American values, that they're choosing him over country.
They don't deserve what they've received from the President of the United States. Yet they've picked quite a few fights.
Mm-hmm.
They're not the leaders that are going to bring some sense to this nationally. I don't think. Do you?
They are forcing the issue. They are strong in their unity, and they are supporting each other. So they can be bullied, but they're strong enough to withstand it. They might be able to push the party and the leaders of the party in a particular way.
Well, they got to resolve.
Just them.
I mean, there was a resolution that, I mean, think about the kind of resolution that they offered 2 weeks ago, which is unprecedented in history, you know, regarding the president's commentary on Twitter. And it was just another pedestrian news story. I mean, it was just, you know, and it got swallowed up by Mueller last week and blah, blah, blah.
It is all distractions. They're absolutely right. I think the Republican Party lets him go off the rails because then they can do what they want.
But they're not going to stop.
No.
So who's going to bring any kind of super credible, objective calm to this conversation in America? Anybody?
Not one person. It has to be groups of people. It has to be a unified campaign.
There's no MLK in our sight.
And let's not
very
distort
frank about, right?
MLK's legacy as well. People hated him when he was alive, so it's easy to make someone an icon when they're dead, right? So
yes.
And that's what's happened.
Halo
with
effect
him.
is in place. You remember what you want to. Right?
Absolutely. So, you know, while he is and was a great leader, he wasn't. He didn't represent even the majority of African Americans, right? Because within the civil rights movement, there were so many different groups who wanted to go in different directions, and he just had the national press behind him because he was the one that was least scary.
Listen, I could talk to you all night. I got 30 seconds. Where are we going in the next few months and next year on this level?
Like I said, this is...
Into the sewer, or are we going to get better?
I hope we can get better, but I think it's going to get worse before we get better. This is Germany 1939. So unless people realize where we are, we're going to go into the 1940s. And that we don't want to be there, but we're going there. Even internationally, we're going there. We can see World War III on the horizon if we're not careful.
Well, that's a tease for another show on another day. Enjoy the rest of your summer.
Thank you. You
Thanks,
too.
appreciate it. You think that's bad? Wait to hear what's coming up tomorrow night. Stay with us. The Boston Globe Online's Amanda Milkovich just wrote a story about, I don't even know how to describe it. It's a disaster out of Bristol with civil litigation that seemingly is coming on sexual abuse that is just, it reads like a horror story, but it's a story that, speaking of phlegm being coughed up, certainly needs to be told, it seems. She'll be here tomorrow night to tell it, so make an appointment. We'll talk to you on the radio at 3 until 6 on WPRO as well. Thanks for tuning in. Good night.